What time is it?
Well, it's 10:04. I see a few other people still joining in if you want to wait just a moment, but
Okay. All right.
all right, I think everyone has joined in that I see is was waiting anyway, Rob. So
Okay, so let's jump in. Hey, folks, thanks for getting on the call. We're going to try to make this a relatively fast one, although I'm always willing to engage in long question and answers if they're necessary or helpful. The big news from last week or since last week, and I'm going to actually pause. Colleen just made a note, and I'll make this note for those council members who are on the call. This meeting was not posted as a town council meeting. We missed the deadline for getting the meeting posted as a meeting on the Secretary of State's website. So at this point, this meeting is one where members of council are in attendance, but they are not participating members so as not to violate the Open Meetings Act. But with that note, I will say that the things that have changed since last week, or the things that have happened since last week, the letter that we talked about last week to non-resident property owners has gone out. That letter is gone out to, Colleen, do you remember the number 2,000 and some odd?
yeah, it was a little more than 2,500.
About 2,500 recipients of that. We've had a change in the approach for dealing with campgrounds, which affects particularly Roy and Mary Carpenters here in South Kingstown. DBR, the Department of Business Regulation, yesterday issued a new definition of what self-contained means for units in a campground. That definition now includes toilets, whether they are flushing toilets or alternative toilets. An alternative toilet is a composting or incinerating toilet. The town has sent some guidance, preliminary guidance, over to those campgrounds. So we're likely to see a influx of folks into Roy Carpenter's. Mary Carpenter's has actually figured this problem out a little bit earlier, and their folks have been on the ground since last weekend. Roy Carpenter's will open up, so that's another 380 units that will be coming in probably over the weekend. DBR also is in receipt of a number of complaints, concerns about the outdoor dining restriction on tents, particularly the restriction that says you can't have enclosures on those tents. I spoke to Liz Tanner at DBR yesterday about this, and they are looking into figuring out how to provide some relief from the requirement that you not have sides in the tent. I don't want to get too deep into it, but my sense is we're going to get some relief from that requirement. I think the tent sides are going to be permissible, but we're probably looking at, you can't have all four sides down while people are in the tent. We're probably looking at some sort of some way of making sure that there's airflow through that space. But we'll know more about that either today or tomorrow. Other than that, Wayne, are you on the call? Wayne Pimentel? No, I think we've had, it's either 9 or 10 outdoor dining temporary service area applications processed. We have no pending applications at this point. We've been able to approve every application that has come in. So we're starting to see that process yield some benefit, I hope. So if anybody is out there who is still looking for an expansion, a temporary expansion of their service area, and you've not made the application form online is working, and we're ready and willing to review those applications. The other thing that I'd like to let folks on the call know is that while we've been pushing very hard, the letter is going out, the COVID Safe Harbor logo sticker thing is at the printer. They're looking for the best way to put together that sort of participant logo thing. They're trying to figure out whether some sort of Klingon window decal, or whether a temporary sticker or a little plastic sign is going to be best. We're looking at price. We're looking at what's used, etc. We should be able, oh, look at this, I just got another request for outdoor dining. We should be able to get that going next week. We should be able to get those decals out to folks starting next week. The other thing I want to point out, though, is we're not abandoning the idea that we have to do social distancing here. And we need to be reinforcing the idea that we have to be responsible as we begin to reopen as well. One of the things that I think folks are struggling with in the state, I think folks are struggling with it across the country, is how do you keep people's mind on the fact that, the social distancing has worked and will continue to work if we do it, without being totally prescriptive and totally troublesome to the business community. So one of the things that we're going to be doing this coming week, and I'm going to share my screen at this point, is we're going to start a little campaign. Are folks seeing that?
Yes. And
Okay.
actually, I just sent you a new email with the final ones.
The final versions, that's fine.
Yeah, but this should do for now. This is good.
That's fine. This just shows you what we're talking about. Over this weekend, the Memorial Day weekend, we will be doing yard signs on all of the main access roads to the beach. The signs will be conveying the message that social distancing is still important. Social distancing saves lives. We're trying to be, sort of non-regulatory in the messaging, trying to make sure that folks understand that this is still a fun place to be, but we have to be responsible as we're enjoying ourselves. So these are the signs. They are all public domain. Members of the business community who'd like to copy these or use them in their own businesses are free to do so. And we've got the file that Colleen just sent me that's available for anybody who'd like to use these or modify these signs. So let's see, how do I scroll down? So there's a series of 8 or 9 signs. We love you this much. The idea is it's a 6-foot spread. This version didn't work out very well. Please practice safe 6. The idea being that, if we can get everybody social distancing, we'll be in better shape. Coronavirus, don't get none on ya. 6 feet over or 6 feet under. Mask it or casket. 6 feet away if you want to stay. All we're saying is give space a chance and keeping each other safe from 6 feet away. Again, the idea here is to be sort of cute and a little jolting in a couple of cases, but to let folks know that it is important as they come into town to remain vigilant. We're going to have to do this. I'm hoping that as the summer goes, we'll continue to find clever ways to convey the message and keep folks sort of laughing and responsible. I mean, one that we don't have in this mix is a drink responsibly, 6 feet away kind of thing. We're going to have to keep the messaging up as we go forward. And we're looking for ways to do that. So any ideas or thoughts the business community's got on how we can get that message out and keep it light enough so that it's not, horrible, but front of mind enough that it continues to be beneficial, we'd appreciate. And that, I think, is our report from Town Hall. So what have we got going out in the business world? Questions, comments?
The only question I would have is, have we done anything on Facebook or on our town website?
So the letter will be published to the website. The decal will be published to the website, that logo, and these messaging, social distancing messages will be posted to the website. Whether they should go to Facebook is a good question. What do folks think about that? Are we trying to get this word out widely, or do we want to sort of let it leak out? And sometimes letting it leak out is, better that it sort of promotes wider distribution. I'm open to ideas on that or suggestions on that.
In our business, we've been using Constant Contact once a week, and we've been changing our Facebook posts every day, and it works. My 2 cents worth. I'm done.
Good. Representative Tansey?
I don't see any reason why we wouldn't use social media on them. Maybe start with the more straightforward ones first and see how people respond, and then, go from there, see what the response is.
Mm-hmm.
And I had also sent some over to Terry Murphy specific to the bike path a couple days back that are, similarly lighthearted. I see a lot of Facebook traffic on whether or not people should be maintaining safe distance on the bike path. And I think everything we can do to reinforce the message is the way to keep summer open.
Good. All right. So we'll figure out how to get them on Facebook, I guess.
We'll do that.
Good. Okay. Terry, on the bike path stuff, how we doing? We've put a bunch of signs up. How are we doing on signage generally?
Yeah, we initially, when this began, we posted signs at the intersections. They are, as Teresa had mentioned the other night, they're a little text heavy in terms of not being quickly read as you're riding a bicycle by or even walking by, whether you're going to stop and actually absorb all of the information. So the signage samples that we received from Teresa are quite clever and more graphic than text. So we're going to try to incorporate some of those onto the path. We obviously, the path has been seeing a high volume of activity, and there are varying degrees of compliance with regard to social distancing and mask wearing and the like. And obviously we're not going to control all of that, but the more messaging we can get out, the better off we'll be.
Okay, good. And the other news on Terry's front is the town beach will be open on Saturday. Similarly, the East Matunic State Beach, if you haven't heard yet, will be open on Memorial Day. There's been some confusion among folks in the community about whether that was a one-day opening or whether it was an opening for the season. It is an opening for the season. East Matunic State Beach will be opening Monday for the entire season. It is not a complete opening. Parking is free, but is restricted. The volume will be about 50% of the capacity of the parking lot. And the facilities, concessions, and restrooms will not be open, at least not in the known future. So it'll be interesting. We're going to have a lot of folks down in East Matunic who will not have restrooms, and will be out on the beach. We'll see how that goes on Monday and Tuesday.
And Rob, excuse me, just to clarify on the town beach, yes, it is opening on Saturday. We are opening with our facilities open.
Right.
As the policy states, we don't open 7 days a week until June 15th. So we're open on weekends up until that second weekend in June, when that's typically how we operate anyway. The only difference is the parking lot will be closed on weekdays because we're not officially open during the week.
The parking ban in Matunic will be lifted effective tomorrow morning. Those barrels have either been removed or will be removed later today. we made some changes down in Matunic with regard to the Mary Carpenter land owned by the town. The fence that previously kept folks from getting onto that parcel easily has been removed, and that space is now available for the public to dine in or just spread out onto. Besides that, I think that's the beach story for the week. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Any problems out there that have come up that we ought to be thinking about in town hall?
I don't have a problem, but I have something I wanted to mention, which is that if you are a restaurant and you have state right of way in front of you and you wanted to expand into the parking stalls, the Department of Transportation has put forward an application, like a one-page application to use the public right of way for outdoor seating. So that was released yesterday. I think that was released partly. I think a number of communities have been advocating for it, but you guys all know that we and Teresa Tanzi and the state reps have been advocating for that. So that came through yesterday. If anybody is looking for that application, you can send me an email because I have a hyperlink right to it. So you're not stuck. You can find it on the IDOT website.
So I will say in that regard, for those businesses that are adjacent to a state, or for that matter, a town right of way, who would like to move into the right of way, the town has talked about and has tracked down the plans for some bump out, these parking lot decks that we've shown in previous meetings. And if you want to go into the right of way and you need some sort of barrier or deck, you need a Jersey barrier, you need some sort of decking to get you flush with the sidewalk, let us know. We can work through that and put some funds in place to help you out if necessary.
Rob, if I may.
Please.
Okay. That application for DOT, I actually caught up with the traffic safety director, Steve Prostawa, just this morning to clarify. They're not allowing us at this point to extend into the right of way. They're allowing use of the sidewalk. And so, I'm still pushing for expansion into the right of way. I'm going to try to rally support from some of the other state agencies to make that allowable. And as of this time, the application is only available for restaurants. We initially, when I had put in the request, had asked for retail as well. Had a lengthy conversation with them this morning explaining that retail could similarly benefit from, expanded space. And got a call just like 2 minutes before we started here saying that they're heavily considering expanding it to that. They'll get back to me as soon as possible. As of right now, the application is just for restaurants to make use of the sidewalk. And then there are some parking expansions that they're talking about on that application as well, so that you could maybe get an extra parking space or two. But check out that application, and if you have any questions, Steve Prostawa from DOT is incredibly accessible and really, a friendly person. He can walk you through that application process. So hopefully we can expand it to retail in the next day or two. And then I'm going to continue to make the push with Commerce and with the governor's office to allow us to go on a 25-mile-an-hour road into the actual right-of-way and use those decks that the town very generously has been offering and very generously has offered to do, in the town's right-of-way. So we've made some progress. DOT is always kind of tough. So, any progress is good at this point.
All right.
And Rob, it's Colleen. We'll put that link up on our website. We've got the application for the restaurant, so we'll put that link up there too. So the restaurants in town will know that they do have that opportunity, since not everyone's on this call.
Okay, good. That's great. All right. Any other issues, challenges, or opportunities that we're aware of? Chris Heiner, well, while we're here and we've got you, we're going to seize on the opportunity. Are you getting any specific guidance out of the fire marshal's office with regard to tents?
I have not received an email back. I called and emailed them yesterday. The only things that we got on the call that we had on Tuesday was what I sent in the email, and I put to anybody that had a canopy or put a tent with sides. I had sent them the same email I sent you, Rob.
Yeah.
That's all I have as of right now. I haven't heard anything back, so I'm waiting for an email. As soon as I get something, I will definitely let you know.
Okay. So there was an interesting expression of the current regulatory intent yesterday in my conversation with Liz Tanner. She indicated that, you know, this idea that you can't serve on a deck that is got a permanent roof over it is really sort of vaguer than the regulation might imply. The issue, as she expressed it, is if your food can get wet while you're sitting under there, if it starts raining, then it's outdoors. If the enclosure is such that, you know, you won't get wet or the food won't get wet, then it's indoors. And
Right.
that was an interesting expression of the problem.
That is interesting.
Anyone else? All right, I know everybody's busy, so we'll let you go then. We're moving ahead. I mean, we're not waiting at this point for a whole lot of direction out of Providence. We're trying to comply with everything they're putting at us in a regulatory stream, and we're trying to make sure that we're consistent and that we're not setting ourselves up for the state finding fault with what we're doing. But we're moving ahead. We need to start noticing things. We've seen a particular challenge around the 14-day self-quarantine piece of the current restrictions. The 14-day quarantine is still in place for out-of-towners, out-of-staters, I should say, who are coming into Rhode Island. It's also a self-quarantine for any Rhode Islander who has left the state and come back. This is a very onerous restriction. It's one that's been very difficult for shoreline communities with out-of-state property owners to enforce. We're trying to work through that. I think that eventually the state's going to find a way to lift that self-quarantine requirement. They are no longer notifying people by National Guard or state police officers at the state borders. So nobody's being stopped and coming in from Connecticut or Massachusetts anymore. And they're no longer providing in-person notification of that requirement at the airports. They found that was just too administratively burdened. It wasn't a very efficient way to provide the notice. We're going to be looking for very unobtrusive ways to notify people of that requirement going forward. But again, this has been, you know, one of those places where there's a tension that we're just going to have to move on here locally. We're not being obnoxious about notifying people. We're just trying to be reasonable. And I think that that's going to be the key for us going forward for the next several weeks, is to look for a balance between the needs of the community, the needs of the business community, the needs of our residents, both permanent and seasonal, and the state's requirements. We are looking for ways to be reasonable. So if you're seeing something that doesn't feel like it's working, if you're seeing something that doesn't feel like it's reasonable, let us know and we'll work with you to try to figure out how to proceed. All right. And with that, unless there's any other hands or anybody else wants to jump in, we're gonna call this a call.
You know what? I think there is a hand raised from somebody on the line, but they're on a phone.
Okay.
So I figured I'd just point it out since they're on a phone. So if this phone number ends in 951 and you want to talk, you can unmute yourself, I think.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah, Rob, this is Bill Johnson. How are you?
Hey, Bill, how are you?
How's everybody today?
We're all
So I did have a couple questions or comments. One is, you mentioned earlier that you were talking with DBR as it relates to the canopies. And then Chris also mentioned that this regulation regarding, the tents or the canopies had to be opened on all four sides.
Right.
So is DBR working through this with the Department of Health?
Yes.
And do we think we're going to get some relief on that regulation? Because if you look at any restaurant out there that
Yeah.
has outside dining, 90% of those restaurants have a canopy overhang.
Yep.
And especially, in, your shoreline communities.
Yeah.
So for them to eliminate that is eliminating their entire outdoor dining area. And that seems egregious.
Yeah, on a call with the governor's office, Liz Tanner in attendance yesterday, I raised this issue and pressed them pretty hard. They've been getting it from others as well. I mean, there's a lot of businesses across the state that have brought this to everybody's attention. They know that they've got a problem with this regulation, that it is not working for restaurants, and that it may or may not yield the benefit that they're looking for. So they are actively trying to come up with a new formulation for that regulation. DBR, through the state fire marshal's office, is going to be the enforcing agency. So the fact that Liz Tanner is actively engaged in trying to come up with a better rule is good. And I think that we're going to end up with a new rule in the next day or two. Today or tomorrow would be my expectation. This is also going to be one of those places where we need to be responsible and we need to just be reasonable. And, we're not going to come in and shut you down because we see a problem with, tent flaps that are up, for example. I mean, if we've got, a tent flap down on the windward side of a tent and it's open on three other sides, we're not going to have a problem. If it's a canopy and the wind is blowing freely through there, we're not going to have a problem. The rationale DOH is using here is that the wind dissipates, open air dissipates the virus. The viral loads are lower outdoors than they are indoors. The viral loads outdoors do not pose nearly the same public health threat as the viral loads indoors. But in order to get the benefit of being outdoors, you actually have to have a flow of air. Otherwise, the dissipation doesn't happen. So what they're trying to do is say, look, if it's so enclosed that you're not going to get the open air dissipation, we're not going to allow it. We get that. We understand that. We've got to look for a way to make sure that we get the dissipation. And maybe it's, some fans or something. We're going to have a way to deal with this. We don't know what it is yet. I can't say exactly what the rule is going to be because I don't know. But, I'm an old bureaucrat, and this feels like a problem that's going to be resolved because the bureaucracy finally gets it.
Okay, so you think that we might have some resolution to this before the weekend?
I think
Hopefully.
we have resolution either today or tomorrow.
Okay.
We've had exchanges with DBR. They're running around trying to solve every problem they can.
Understood.
But we've had resolutions that have taken longer than they should in a couple of instances. And not because it's DBR's fault, I'll point out. I mean, Roy Carpenter's is going to open this weekend. And part of what has held up the opening of Roy Carpenter's is that we had to get DBR and DEM talking about what an alternative toilet is. And that's, that kind of conversation is not an easy one for folks to have at any time. And under these pressures, it's particularly difficult. So I think that, everybody's talking, everybody's trying to move as fast as they can. Everybody understands the canopy and tent problem. I think that we can get resolution fairly quickly, but you just never know if, you've hit some stick in the mud in the process that you weren't expecting.
Excellent. I do also have one other question, and might be directed more towards Teresa. Do we have any idea on how long the state might be requiring reservations for restaurants or when that restriction might be lifted? Because I am getting some pushback from some of my restaurants as far as that requirement.
So I'll let Teresa talk about what the state plans may be, but I would suggest that one way to resolve this is to come up with a creative solution to reservations. Reservations don't need to be made from home. They can be made by, by a customer in the parking lot outside of the business. It's not going to be perfect, but if you're driving by and you see there's a signboard with a phone number, call here for the reservation, and the reservation is made immediately. It's like a regular waiting list as opposed to a serious reservation system.
Yeah. The only thing to that is the intent of it is that there's nobody waiting so that they don't have to worry about a large crowd. So, that's the intent behind it. And then also to some degree, I think they want at least the name of one of the people in the party should some kind of an outbreak happen where, someone at the restaurant is sick or, they do want to have that for contact tracing. So those are the two main reasons for it, and any way that you can creatively get around it. I know that Commerce, for those who don't have currently have a reservation system, Commerce has a few groups that have volunteered their time to help on websites. There's that Open Table app that's been around. I don't know if they charge anything, but there are existing things that restaurants can pick up in a ready to use box already, or if they want to develop something, they can reach out to Commerce as well.
Okay.
But drive-by reservations are allowed. The idea about not forming lines is not forming lines of people stacked up on a sidewalk. Lines of people or groups of people in their cars in the parking lot is fine. I mean, that's an isolated group. It's not an issue. So drive-by reservations are fine, so long as you've got a way for folks to not be queuing up on the sidewalk or outside the door. If they're queued up in the parking lot, that's perfectly okay.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
That's great. All right, any other questions or issues we need to bat around here? All right, folks, thanks a lot. As always, Town Hall remains willing to respond to questions from anybody who's got a concern at any time during the week. Just let us know. Thanks, be well.
Thank you.
Thanks.